Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're talking about a geopolitical crisis, one that pushed the US and Canada, two of the closest allies, right to the brink. And believe it or not, it was all about garbage. Yeah, you heard that right. We're going to break down how millions of tons of trash ended up sparking this insane battle of tariffs, threats, and political power plays.
So how on earth did a fight over toys lead to an international crisis over trash? It sounds absolutely bizarre, right? But that's exactly what happened. We're going to unpack this whole thing because this seemingly random lawsuit involving a toy company, well, it blew the lid off a really fragile economic dependency that was just waiting to snap.
Okay, to really get how fast this all went down, you have to look at this one single day, February 20th, 2026. It was absolute chaos. In the morning, you have a Supreme Court decision that completely upends U.S. trade policy. By the afternoon, the president fires right back with a whole new set of tariffs. And by evening, a Canadian premier is basically declaring a trade war, all in less than 24 hours. All right, so let's get into the flashpoint. The fuse for this whole explosion wasn't lit in Washington or Ottawa. It was lit in a courtroom. And it all kicked off because a company that makes educational toys decided to take on the President of the United States.
And this was a huge deal. The Supreme Court actually sided with the toy company in a 6-3 vote. They basically said, nope, the president can't just use emergency powers to slap on tariffs like that. And just like that, poof, a massive 25% tariff on Canadian goods was wiped off the books. And that tariff had included, you guessed it, all that garbage. This one decision set off an immediate and I mean furious chain reaction. So, you might be wondering, why did a court ruling about tariffs suddenly cause this massive panic over trash? Well, it's because that ruling ripped the lid off a huge systemic flaw, a problem that had been quietly festering for decades. I'm talking about this massive one-way conveyor belt of garbage flowing from Ontario, Canada, straight into Michigan's landfills. And the sheer scale of this is just staggering. We're talking about 3.46 million tons of solid waste every single year. This wasn't some minor side deal. This was a critical release valve. Without it, Ontario's entire waste management system was in big, big trouble. And this chart really drives the point home. Just look at that. Nearly 15%, 14.35% to be exact, of all the trash buried in Michigan landfills doesn't come from Michigan. It's not from Ohio or Indiana. It's trucked in from Canada. Michigan had essentially become Ontario's personal landfill. And here's why. This table lays out the core economic imbalance. Look at Ontario. They're running out of room fast. They've only got about 6 to 9 years of landfill capacity left. Now look at Michigan. They've got over 20 years of space. And here's the kicker. They were charging a measly 36 cents per ton in fees. It was just so much cheaper to load up a truck and drive it across the border. That economic gap created this powerful, unstoppable flow of garbage. But here's the thing. Even before that big Supreme Court bombshell, this whole setup was already getting squeezed. It was basically a two-front war. You had pressure coming from the state level in Michigan, and you had another battle brewing at the federal level in D.C. So on the state front, you had Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer trying to shut this down. Her idea was to jack up those super low landfill fees from just 36 cents a ton all the way up to $5. But that so-called trash tax just couldn't get through the legislature. Why? Because it would have hit Michigan residents in the wallet too. And that's a tough political sell. Meanwhile, at the federal level, you had President Trump's massive 25% tariff hanging over everything. So when the Supreme Court struck that down, did he back off? Nope, he just pivoted. Instantly. He used a different law to slap on a new 10% global surcharge. So the pressure was still very much on, it just had a new name. And this is where things get really tricky. The new tariff came with a loophole. If your goods were made in North America under the trade deal, you were exempt. That works for a car, but think about a garbage truck. It's full of thousands of random things. How in the world do you prove that every single coffee cup, every plastic wrapper, every banana peel in there originated in North America? You can't. It's a logistical nightmare. So now you've got this existential threat. Garbage is potentially going to start piling up on the streets of Ontario. So the provincial government, led by Premier Doug Ford, did not just sit back and take it. Oh no, they fought back. And they fought back hard. Yeah, Premier Ford's response was, well, let's just say it wasn't subtle. He came right out and said he was willing to do anything, even cutting off energy to the U.S., with a smile on his face. He was ready to use one of Ontario's biggest economic weapons. It's electricity. And this wasn't just tough talk. He actually did it. Ontario slapped a 25% surcharge on all the electricity it was exporting to Michigan, New York, and Minnesota. This wasn't some symbolic gesture. This was meant to cause real economic pain directly to U.S. consumers and businesses. So while they were playing offense against the U.S., they were also making some big moves back home. The Ontario government used this whole border crisis as political cover for a really controversial new law, Bill 5. What did it do? It basically allowed them to fast-track new landfills by skipping over a lot of the usual environmental assessments. Now, the government's argument was pretty simple. They said, look, about 40% of our business waste goes to the U.S. We can't rely on a hostile, unpredictable border anymore. We have to become self-sufficient. And that meant pushing ahead with projects like the big York 1 landfill site in Dresden, even if it meant bending or breaking some of the normal environmental rules to get it done fast.
Okay, so after all this chaos, where did things land? Well, the big, splashy tariffs are gone, but in their place is something new, something more subtle. A new kind of border barrier that isn't about paying a tax. It's about providing proof. It's about data.
And to deal with this new reality, the whole waste industry had to get really, really creative. This is where you see some amazing innovation. A whole new model popped up called Waste as a Service. It's all about using technology, software, AI, GPS, to prove you're compliant and actually make it across the border. See, the problem was no longer about money, it was about proof. You had to prove where your garbage came from, and technology was the answer. You've got these incredible new apps that use AI to literally scan a truckload of waste, they lock in the origin with GPS, and then, bam, they generate a perfect audit-ready manifest for the regulators. It's basically a digital passport for garbage. So what does this whole great garbage war really tell us? It's a fascinating look into the future of trade, right? It suggests a world where crossing a border has less to do with what you're physically shipping and everything to do with whether you have the clean, verifiable data to prove it. In this new era of border friction, maybe data, provable data, is the most valuable passport of all.